Introducing the Bite Me Cannabis Club. The Bite Me Cannabis Club aims to be an inclusive online space for cannabis lovers. Whether you're simply curious about how cannabis can improve your life or you're fully seasoned, there's always more to learn. When you join the Bite Me Cannabis Club, you'll have access to like-minded people interested in cannabis, monthly workshops, live Q&As, recipes and recipe swaps, digital cookbooks, a fully functional chat feature, and a whole lot more. For a limited time, it's only $5 a month with a 30-day free trial so you can try it out and see if it's right for you. This isn't just another Facebook group or confusing Discord channel. I carefully chose a platform that offers a clear, uncluttered, and seamless community experience. See for yourself, join today, say hello. I can't wait to connect with you there. Join the Bite Me Cannabis Club today. Link in your podcast app. Welcome back, friends, to a special episode of Bite Me. We are doing a Faces of Cannabis interview this week. Stay tuned as I sit down and speak with the host of the Smoke to Smoke podcast. Welcome to the Faces of Cannabis interview series, where we take a break from talking about edibles and focus on the people behind the plant. Whether it's fellow podcasters, bud tenders, gangiers, advocates, cultivators, cannabis lovers all have their stories to share, and I want to share them with you. Whether you're new to the show or a longtime listener, you know that I often use olive oil in my cooking and my infusions. When I discovered McAvoy Ranch olive oil, I knew I needed to give them a try, and I love everything about these oils and the company. The oils come from a family-owned farm that is both female-founded and led. They produce these organic olive oils sustainably at their Northern Californian ranch. They've just released an innovative and delicious signature olive oil collection that includes organic blood orange and award-winning chai spice and ginger turmeric. The collection brings together flavors from multiple cultures to create new ways to enjoy olive oil. With this in mind, cards are included with the samples that detail the tasting profiles and ways to use the oils so you can try them with any meal. McAvoy Ranch is committed to creating the highest quality, healthy, bright, and fresh olive oils that will enhance your cooking in delightful ways. Enjoy the unique flavors and well-known health benefits of olive oil by heading over to McAvoyRanch.com and enter promo code BITEME15 at checkout to receive 15% off your order. I had the absolute pleasure of sitting down with fellow podcaster and cannabis enthusiast Miss Cadabra of the Smoke to Smoke podcast. She's been podcasting for about a year now, and in this conversation, we talk about what inspired her to start her podcast, what gets her excited in the world of cannabis and beyond, and things that would surprise you about her. Without further ado, please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Miss Cadabra of the Smoke to Smoke podcast. All right, everyone, I am thrilled to be joined today by Miss Cadabra of the Smoke to Smoke podcast. And if you could just take a second, Miss Cadabra, and introduce yourself to the listeners of Bite Me, the show about edibles, that would be fantastic.
All right. Well, hello. My name is Miss Cadabra. I'm the host of Smoke to Smoke podcast. It's an educational cannabis and now mycology podcast that aims to broaden the everyday conversation that we have on our alternative herbs.
Oh, I like that you mentioned mycology because that is something that I've noticed you've been talking about a bit more as well. So maybe we can touch on that a little bit during this conversation. But my understanding is that you're a medical cannabis patient. And how has that influenced your perspective on the cannabis culture, cannabis industry?
Well, when I joined the world of medical cannabis, that completely shifted my perspective on just the world of the plant in general. Talking to more and more people in the industry as well has allowed me to widen my perspective entirely. Before getting into the world of legal weed, I wasn't really sure how the process worked at all. And from all the stories I was hearing, working in the industry sounded kind of like a utopia. However, now that I'm actually exploring the topic myself, the more I began to understand that there's more to smoke than just the THC percentage. You're able to find these different terpenes, or different strains have different effects, and not everything is the same thing. And there was also I learned about learning, like working in the industry itself, it's not as easy as a lot of people think it is. There's a lot of just roadblocks that are put in their way to make it where it's not the most ideal business to get into, even though some places it's been around. Like in Colorado, I believe their medical program's been around since 2000, but in Arkansas, where the show originated from, it only been around since about 2016, with the first stores rolling out in like 2019, I believe. So it's just a different, everybody's at different stages to where we're all having conversations at different levels. And with my show, I'm trying to kind of unite that.
Right. And so you've sort of broadened your horizons with the medical cannabis component. Is that what I'm understanding? Like you've sort of dove more into the nuances, like you said, because it sounded like, and you're very much like me before, it's just like all about high THC stuff. Mm-hmm. And I used to work in a dispensary and I saw that all the time. But when you sort of broaden your horizons and get into terpenes and all that stuff, it's definitely way more to it and way more nuanced.
Yeah. I mean, like really nowadays, I look more so for like, I base what I want from the dispensary off of the smell profile and the terpenes, if they have those on hand, just because it gives me more of an idea of what I'm going to be affected like than just indica sativa, which is another thing I learned from the medical program, is that those labels aren't really the best for it because it doesn't give you the most information on what the strain actually does.
Right. That's very true. So have you always been a cannabis consumer even before you became a medical patient?
Yeah, but I'd say probably years prior to my cannabis consumption, I used to be very against it. There's we had like the DARE program and the GREAT program here, which was like gang resistance education. Don't remember the whole acronym or whatever, but basically they were just telling us that weed was bad. You got it from bad people and it made you do bad things. So of course I was just eating all that up and spitting it back out. So I didn't really know that it had any benefits at all, especially when it came to my depression, until I think it was like sometime in high school. I was trying to impress a group of kids because they asked me if I smoked, and I was like, yeah, of course I do. No, I had no idea. But I eventually ended up getting into it and finding out that it was just like, it wasn't just all these crazy stories about how it was going to make you trip balls and all that craziness and like lose your job. It wasn't like you can lose your job if you get drug tested and stuff, but you won't act buck wild to lose your job basically when you're smoking weed. It's a lot about just how it affects the individual user. And I learned more about that as well.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. You mentioned it. It sounds a little bit like the reefer madness stuff that they used to talk about too. Like, you're going to go out and murder people and all these crazy things. I do recall myself the DARE programs and how, if you started smoking weed, next thing you know, you'd be doing heroin in a back alley and that kind of thing. And obviously that has misinformed many, many people. And so I guess you and I are both trying to fight that stigma a little bit.
Yeah.
So is that sort of what you're aiming to do with your podcast? I'd love to talk about your podcast for a minute, Smoke to Smoke. How long have you been doing that for?
I've been doing Smoke to Smoke for a little bit over a year at this point, and what I aim to do with it is, like you said, I'm trying to break down the stigma, because I had been on another podcast, and probably one of my least favorite questions I had gotten so far was like, oh, how much have you smoked? And it's not really about the amount that you smoke. It's about the experience you get from responsible consumption. So that's what I'm trying to have, that consumer education out there so that they're able to know how to consume cannabis responsibly, the different ways to consume, and what to do if you felt like you've had too much.
Right. I love that you mentioned that too, because I feel like traditional maybe cannabis culture really does focus on the whole idea of smoking huge joints and giant bongs and like wake and bake and smoking all day. And for some people that works, that's great. But for a lot of other people, that doesn't really serve them. And so I love it when people talk about how cannabis is an experience and how you should tailor it to fit your own life. And that doesn't necessarily mean obvious consumption or whatever. So I love that you mentioned that. Do you have any big wins, or have you overcome any challenges when it comes to starting the podcast? Because I know from personal experience, it's a big job.
Well, any big wins that I've had from the podcast have really been within the past few months. I've been noticing a little bit more ramp up in just interest in the show, which I'm not exactly sure why. I'm not complaining, but I've been trying to go out there, just kind of put my face out there more. I've been doing a lot more interviews because I interview a lot of people on my show basically every week. Like I've got almost 80 episodes, most of them being interviews at this point. And I've maybe done a handful of interviews myself, so I've been trying to get more out there this year, and I've been featured in it was called Shout Out Colorado, which is their young entrepreneur magazine, and then I got featured in the Highest Critic, I believe it's called. I had Caleb
Yes.
Chin on my show. He was a writer. He's the editor in chief for that newspaper, and that's more centralized in the cannabis niche. And he's just a cannabis lifestyle magazine, so I was featured on that too.
Right. And you had Caleb on your show as well, because I think
Yes.
that's when I first discovered you and maybe Caleb as well. And I'm familiar with his website, The Highest Critic, and he does all the reviews. He's doing a great job. He also happens to be a fellow Gangier, and I went through the Gangier program myself. So it's kind of funny how it all comes together. And the cannabis community, even though it can be pretty widespread, can also be really small. So it's kind of interesting that that's how we made our connection. Have you had any favorite guests so far? Now that it sounds like you've done a lot of episodes and a lot of interviews.
Yeah, some of my favorite guests that I've had on the show. I mean, one guest that I've really been able to actually meet in person because I did a giveaway back in February. They were the winner, and we were right in the middle of a move like that next month. So I just held onto the giveaway package. We drove right through Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I just dropped it off and met her in person instead of sending it through the mail. So saved me on some shipping costs there. But her name's Ebony Jones, and she's an ordained cannabis friendly minister, as well as she makes her own line of non-infused treats. Basically, she likes to go to a lot of events that you get the munchies at, and you need a nice sweet treat or something. She makes like
Right.
dip chocolate, strawberries, sweet potato pies, just a wide variety of different sweets that she likes to make. And she said she's trying to cut down on that, make more savory options too, just because she wants to have more of a health conscious effect on the community. But as of right now, she's got some really good pies. So if you're not even thinking about being health conscious, I mean, try out one of the pies.
Right.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. And it's always fantastic meeting like guests or listeners or whatever in person, because it doesn't happen very often. And sometimes when you're podcasting, it can feel a little isolating.
Yeah.
But have you had any particular challenges that you had to overcome while creating the show?
So many challenges trying to get off the ground with social media. Like even this past month, I've been on a pretty heavy shadow ban. Like I'm just now getting lifted to where I'm able to post a few little suggestive content here and there, but I can't post explicit dollar amounts anymore because even though I wasn't promoting sales, I was talking about the prices of cannabis in a different state because it was expensive. And then my post got flagged for trying to sell weed, and they tried to remove my page. And I got like 6 or something posts flagged within the same day, and 3 of those flags were for the same post. It just had multiple pictures to slide through. It's just really hard to try to get the word out there about the show when I find out that all of a sudden Instagram has these like new update in place to where it's actively not promoting my content.
Right. Yes, I feel your pain. I feel like I'm always shadow banned to some degree. Like if you search my show on social media, it's probably not going to come up. And so I've pretty much eliminated using most cannabis related hashtags because it just gets you flagged and you get taken down. So I can really appreciate that challenge. Maybe one day that will change. It would be really nice, I guess, if the US decided to make cannabis federally legal. It would probably change everything. But until then, that's going to be a problem that I guess all content creators have to go through. But
Yeah.
do you have any common misconceptions about the work that you're doing in cannabis right now?
I'd say that like I don't get a lot of like hateful stereotypes thrown in my face in like everyday life because outside of the podcast, like I don't bring up my weed consumption or anything like that at work just because there could be a hassle and I'm not wanting to deal with it. So I just kind of keep that to myself because it doesn't really affect my functioning at work, and I don't want them to find out I smoke weed and suddenly think it does. But one thing that I guess it's kind of a misconception for the content creation industry, especially now that I've ventured out more into product reviews, is that a lot of the people who do the product reviews or strain reviews in my niche are just in it to get the free product. And I've seen a lot of people
Oh,
that are, but a lot of people are just trying to share their knowledge on how it affects them because there's not a widely known study on a lot of these different strains or products that we're seeing out there. So it's best to get like an actual testimonial from somebody who's tried it as opposed to just reading what the website has to say about the product and trusting that that's what's going to work for you.
right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it never really occurred to me that people are doing it just to get the product because obviously if you do get the product, that's great. But then you actually have to do the work of,
Yeah.
making a good review so that people can like make good use of it. Now, you're in Colorado. Are you able to like see the cannabis and smell it before you buy it, or is it all packaged?
That was actually the weirdest thing from moving from the Arkansas medical program to out here. In Arkansas, everything for the most part, most dispensaries had it pre-packaged, but in Colorado, sorry about that, we got some motorcyclists outside.
No, that's okay.
In Colorado, I've noticed that a lot of the buds are it's kind of like deli style dispensaries for the most part. You've got some places that have the prepackaged nicer well no, I shouldn't say nicer. They've just got like nicely packaged buds and everything. The presentation is there. But for the most part, you can get some nice chunky buds or even nice popcorn buds that are just out in jars that you're able to sniff. I don't think they want you
Right.
touching them. I haven't
Yeah.
risked that, but yeah, you can get your nose pretty close if you want to get a whiff of what it might affect you. Like if you were able to kind of base your preferences off of your scent, off the scent profiles, if you've gotten that far.
Well, and you kind of mentioned that earlier, right? Like you said, the nose knows. So when
Yeah.
you have the ability to like open a jar, and I can understand why they don't want people touching it or handling it, you're going to knock off trichomes and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But being able to smell it ahead of time, I think, is a huge advantage. And it's something that we do not enjoy in the legal market here in Canada. Unfortunately, everything's packaged and the customer can't even like touch it
Mm,
before they buy it. And they don't really get to see or look at the weed or smell it before they buy it. You have to like take it out of the store and open it. And then you get to
wow.
see. So you really
Well,
do rely on the recommendations of bud tenders in that particular
yeah.
instance. But yeah, so that's pretty lucky.
Well, in Arkansas, they did actually like even though the things were prepackaged, it was like it wasn't like an actual seal on top of the jars, so they could still open up the buds, let you smell them, but still, of course, you couldn't touch them. It was just of a
Right.
much smaller scale, because everything like they weren't getting weighed in front of you, so some of the buds might have been a little bit lighter packaged, but sometimes it might have a little bit more than that eighth in there. It just kind of depends on how they weighed it out. So it
Right.
I like the deli style more because you're actually able to see them weighed in front of you. And some people get really hostile when they feel like they're getting tricked out of some weed. I'm not like that, but I just like sometimes I'm like, this looks like a little bit less, but I haven't had that problem lately.
Well, sometimes even when it's prepackaged, that can happen anyway. If it's been sitting on the shelf for a while and it loses some of the, dries out a little bit
Mhm.
between when it was packaged and when you get it home. I've seen that happen a lot too. So I guess there's not a really good solution for that. I think the deli style thing to me sounds way more preferable because you can see what you're buying and you can smell it first, which
Yeah.
is a huge advantage. But
Mhm.
now, do you have any advice that you see dispensed a lot, whether it's with podcasting or in the cannabis world, that you think is like the worst advice ever that people should just stop saying or talking about?
Hmm. Some of the worst advice that I'm seeing. Really, I've had people say it a lot on my show is that if you're really like if you have an idea for a business, just go for it. And I feel like there is a lot of planning that needs to go into making a strategic launch before you just kind of, oh, I have this dream, let me just launch it. Because yeah, sometimes the cards align for some of the people, but a lot of the time it's really hard, especially in the cannabis industry, to get the word out there about your product, to get proper funding, to get it off the ground, to get the proper um, make sure you're able to fulfill orders if you're meeting demands in that way. And so it's a lot of those things that people don't really think of before they jump into making a business. They just like, I like weed, or it's a lot of money in the industry, which that's a mistake. But
Yeah. Yep.
it's just like people need to do more research before they just jump into something, even if it makes them passionate about it. Because honestly, I kind of want to say I wish I did a little bit more research myself, because I was just like, oh, I want to do a podcast. What should I do it about? And I was gonna do one about music theory, because I had did a lot of jazz and classical growing up. I really liked that, but I couldn't find myself making a bunch of episodes about it. So I was like, let me just talk about weed. And it's really hard to come up with a whole bunch of solo episodes about weed if you're just getting into the medical program and don't know anything about it. So again, it's just about doing something with like not always doing something within your means. It's always good to push yourself a little bit beyond your limits, just to so you're
Mm-hmm.
able to grow, but at the same time don't be overly ambitious with it.
Right. Yeah. I do like the idea of having a bit of a plan. I probably feel the same way too, but when I started my podcast, because I was like, I really like edibles and I love podcasts. So that's how it kind of started. But I probably should have done a bit more research myself first, because it's tough to earn a living from a podcast,
Yeah.
especially when you're an independent podcast like myself or like you. But speaking of cannabis, do you have any cannabis heroes or people that in the industry that you really look up to or admire?
Yeah, one person that I've always looked up into the industry, it is Wanda James. She worked for Simply Pure in Denver, Colorado, and she was the first and very time the only African American dispensary owner in, I'm pretty sure it was the United States. It started out in just Colorado, of course, but she's a former Navy lieutenant, and she's a political campaign manager as well, who was actually appointed to work on Barack Obama's National Finance Committee back when he was in office, which I thought was really cool. I love me some Obama, so that's pretty
Right.
yeah. But
That is pretty cool.
she's definitely an inspiration to me. Like, she's just a powerful Black woman that I aspire to be. If I could make at least a fraction of the impact that she's made with her positivity and just the way she's trying to get out there and spread education, I'd be a pretty happy camper.
Right. And that's pretty cool too, when you have somebody with like a military background and the political connections and everything, and they're advocating for weed as well.
Yeah.
Because I really feel like that just shows that people from all walks of life are using cannabis day to day. And yeah. Is there anything that would surprise people about you?
Well, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but it honestly feels like worlds away at this point. Before COVID, I used to teach music and make beats as well. I had like a few small albums come out, like an EP and stuff, where it wasn't anything like a large production on Spotify or Apple Music or anything like that. Like, I just uploaded it to SoundCloud, but I made a few different kind of boom bap style productions that I really enjoyed making, and then ventured into other different background rap beats. I never could get anybody to actually hop on and spit some bars for me, but it was something that I really enjoyed doing, because I got that from when I was teaching classical and jazz for a little bit after I got out of high school, which was like a little bit before COVID went down. But I like piecing those things together, how different instruments kind of flow into the sounds of other things, and how you can make a whole beautiful landscape out of it. But yeah, I definitely miss it.
All right. So after a second of technical difficulties, you were mentioning that you like to do or before the pandemic, you're into making music. And is that stuff still out on SoundCloud? Like, would you be able to send me a link? I could put it in the show notes or anything?
I might be able to find it, but I'm also not sure if that's linked to my government name, so I'm not necessarily sure if I want to put that out there publicly. But
Okay,
if I can find it, and if it's not, if it doesn't dox me or whatever, I will gladly send that over to you.
Yeah, sure, that'd be
it's
fun.
stuff I made a long time ago,
Right.
but I still find some enjoyment out of some of the stuff that I made.
And do you still play music at all?
No, I have not been able to afford an instrument since the pandemic. When I was in school, it was way different, because I was able to just kind of finesse my way in there with my skills, so they gave me like a scholarship instrument. But now that I graduated, there's not really those luxuries to just adulting people.
Yeah.
And like the instrument I played predominantly is called a contra clarinet. It's about 6 feet tall.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the cheapest I saw, I believe, was maybe $14,000 for it. Now I don't have
14,000. Wow.
it.
Okay. Yeah. I wouldn't be playing either then.
No, no.
So a contra clarinet, is that like a bass clarinet?
It's like a step above a bass clarinet. When I was teaching private music, I taught the entire family, the smallest clarinet being one of my least favorites, just because you got to be the most technically fast on that one. And my fingers, like as I'm getting older, I'm not that old, but they kind of still get stiffened up when it's cold. So I guess it's
Right.
just from playing for like almost a decade. It kind of did that to my hands.
Wow, that's so
But,
interesting. I used to play clarinet way back, like in high school, which for me was quite a while ago. And it's a beautiful instrument, but I sat next to a kid who took private lessons and he always showed me up and made me look really bad. But yeah, it's a beautiful instrument. So that's pretty interesting. But when you think of the word successful, who is the first person that comes to mind for you?
hmm. When I think of the word successful, a former guest that I had on the show last year, by the name of Luna Stour. When I initially reached out to her, I don't remember, I believe she was just one of the VP in sales at iSpire. But from
Hmm.
the time that I initially reached out to her to by the time she got on my show, she had moved up to where she's now the CIO of the company. And
Okay.
ever since I started following her on Instagram, she never ceases being busy. She's always out there speaking at a variety of conferences throughout the year. She does a lot of traveling, and recently she started speaking on cannabis and psychedelic advocacy and tangent to one another. And she's just a very business focused person.
Right. That's pretty interesting. It's always neat to see people that you admire to sort of advancing their careers in the public sphere. And all that public speaking really does help to bring awareness to the work that you're doing, but it's also kind of terrifying when I think
Yeah,
about
like
it.
I couldn't imagine myself doing that for a living. Like it's
Right.
stressful enough to like prepare for like one little speech, or if I got to do something like that.
Yeah.
But then it just like, oh, I got to talk to all these people and like over 50 people multiple times. That's crazy. No.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's a little easier when you're doing it on a podcast and you're kind of like
Yeah.
behind the mic and it just feels a little more anonymous, even though you could have 50, 100, however many people, if all those listeners were sitting in the same room, it would feel a lot different. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Now, I understand that you are just starting out with edibles. Is that the case? Are you pretty new to making edibles yourself? Because I saw that you were making some videos of some really tasty looking edibles recently.
Yes, I just got into like I've made a couple things beforehand in Arkansas with some concentrates just because it was easier to try to experiment with those than to buy shake in large
Hmm.
quantities and try to do that because I believe they were selling shake for about 20 an eighth, 25 an eighth, and that's a lot.
Oh, wow.
Because
Yeah,
yeah,
that seems like a lot.
here I think I got like an ounce of shake for $10.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
So
sounds a little more reasonable to me.
yeah, and I was
Yeah.
able to like once it opened up here, I was able to actually experiment so much more. Like, okay, how do I actually infuse and make butter and make it in a way that I feel like all the potency is distributed evenly? Because that was the issue I had with my last prior batches. They were pretty potent, but not all of them were pretty potent. Some of them were just cookies
Right. Yeah,
because the
like they
batter didn't.
right. So
Yeah,
some of them would get you really high and some of them wouldn't get you high at all.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want that.
No,
I can say. Do you have like a favorite thing to make so far?
so far, my favorite thing to make has been muffins. I'm probably gonna try to make some pineapple muffins this week,
Ooh,
but I call them dummy muffins just because I feel like I can get away with saying dummy muffins on Instagram instead of saying infused muffins. But
right.
it's kind of like the same principle. You eat them and you get a little bit dumber, and
Right.
they're I definitely love making. My favorite ones so far I made were, they were like a cranberry muffin that I put a little bit of raspberry Bellini jelly in, some ricotta
Ooh,
cheese, and it made it just like a very moist muffin. It wasn't like the cinnamon
right.
one I made, which was a little bit drier.
Wow, that sounds really good. You sound like you're quite the gourmet cook.
I've done a lot of baking before. I used
Right.
to make a lot of cheesecakes, like the
Okay.
springform cheesecakes. That was my go-to. I made like a honey lavender, a pistachio, pumpkin, something for different holidays. And my husband really likes the honey lavender for our birthday,
Right.
but like I kind of stopped baking after my mom got sick with diabetes just because I felt so unmotivated to keep making sweets in the quantity that I was making,
Right.
because I was
Yeah.
making like a big cheesecake once or twice a week.
Oh,
So that's a
really?
lot. That's a lot to eat through. So I was like, maybe I should
Yeah.
slow down on my sweet consumption. And I honestly, like, I hadn't started making sweets again for, it's been over a year until I started making sweets again.
Right. But now you're infusing them. Is that the
Yes, now I'm
idea?
infusing them.
Yeah, because I
Yes.
personally find I don't bake a whole lot unless I am infusing something because I do have a sweet tooth. And if I infuse
Mm.
something, it forces me to eat a reasonable amount.
Yeah,
Whereas if
exactly.
it's not, then I'm like, oh, half a cheesecake? Why not? That sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Honey lavender sounds amazing.
Yeah, my that was one of my favorites to make. It's definitely a complicated one, but I
Right.
I I had to find the lavender extract, but it couldn't be like an actual like dropper like the alcohol based one. It had to be like a gel because
Okay.
just the flavor profile is like way different for some reason. And I found
Right.
that out especially with like using too much lavender as well. It's like
Right.
very aromatic in your mouth, and
Too
it's not
much.
good. Yeah.
Right. So if you're fairly new to making edibles, do you have any advice to other people who are just starting out in that edibles game?
Yeah, research. Like, don't think you can just throw some weed in a crock pot with your food and just call it a day, because there's so many different nuances to how to like decarb, the different infusion methods you want to use based on what medium you're trying to infuse in the first place, measuring everything out properly. Like, there's so many things that go into it to
Hmm.
where like the first batch of muffins I made, I think I was like reading up to make sure I was doing everything correctly for about 3 days before I actually put the batter together and everything. Because I got the
Right.
stovetop infuser that I was telling you about a while back,
Yeah.
and I didn't know how to use it. The instructions weren't helping, so I had to look for YouTube videos on it. And now I'm like way more comfortable actually infusing butter.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of practice too. Like
Mm,
doing it a few times over and over again. It can seem super intimidating at first. And then you try it a few times. You're like, okay, this isn't so bad. And I'm not going to overdose myself. So,
yeah.
yeah. Now you have, I think we talked about this briefly earlier, but you're interested in mycology too. What got you interested in that?
Really just moving somewhere where it was legal and I could talk about it.
Right.
You definitely
Yeah.
was not talking about that in Arkansas. I've had a few people who wanted me to be on their show to talk about my psychedelic experiences, and I was like,
Right.
nah, let me not. But now that I'm out here, and I believe it's called Prop 122, which allows for just the personal cultivation as well as like you can buy the genetics, you can buy the grow kits, you just can't buy the finished product. That's a no-no.
Right.
But it's allowed me to actually learn about mushrooms, not just kind of like get into it to have like a crazy trip. It's been like that's another one of those things, just like with weed, thinking I'm going to get into it just to like, oh, just have some fun, but you learn so much out of it that that's the fun of it at that point, is learning how to grow, learning that like the different strains have different effects. And like lately, I've been partnering with a small business that's local to here in Colorado that is called Myceli Unlimited, and he makes the genetics for a lot of different psilocybin and functional mushroom strains. So he's been gifting me a lot of products, which that's another nuance of the Prop 122, is that you can have final product as it's being gifted and there's no money
Oh, really?
exchanging hands. Yeah.
Okay. That
So
sounds
he's
pretty
been
inclusive then.
Yes, it's been really nice. I've
Yeah.
seen no problems thus far, especially now it's like decriminalized too, so like the police aren't really going to hassle you about it.
Right. Well, I'm
It's
sure
been
they've
like,
got bigger problems to deal with than
yeah,
mushrooms and cannabis. So,
yeah, like come on
yeah.
now. There's
Yeah.
way bigger things out there. But I've been working with him, so he's been gifting me different strains, and probably once a week or once every couple weeks, I've been trying to review each of these different fruits and just talk about how the different Cubenza strains affect me.
Okay. And have you had a favorite one so far? I mean, I know there's so many, what people might not know, there's so many different strains that
Mhm.
most people think golden teachers or whatever. That's sort of like the classic, but I know there's tons of strains out there.
Yeah, like when I first got into it, I was like, "There's golden teachers, and that's it." But then he's like showed me like these 6 different crazy strains so far, and I know there's a lot more. And my favorite one that I've had so far, it's kind of a tie between the one that I recently tried last night, which was called Pink Buffalo, or
Hmm.
one that I had a few weeks back, which was a Mazatepec. Both of those were like a very energizing strain. The Pink Buffalo took a longer time to have that actual onset of like the waves of color in your vision, kind of the pulsating, like feels like things are like things around you are breathing, like the walls and the floors and things. You're able to see those colorful kind of ebbs and flows in the movement. But I didn't notice that necessarily until about like 4 hours in was I starting to get those effects.
Oh,
While with the
wow.
Mazatepec, it was more probably within the first hour or so, I was able to feel that immediately, like, oh yeah, that's happening.
Right, right, right.
But
That's so
I like,
interesting.
yeah, I like that. Like I said, I wasn't expecting them to have the different effects just because I thought like all strains were the same. I didn't even really know that mushrooms had strains,
Hmm. Yeah, I know. We
but
think of like the classic golden teachers or the Amanita muscaria ones, the red ones with the
yeah.
white dots that, are pretty a classic symbol for magic mushrooms. I've never tried those myself, but um
I'm not a big fan of those. I just didn't
no.
really feel anything,
Oh,
like
interesting.
because those mushrooms is tricky because in larger quantities with those you will definitely feel nauseous. They warn that if you take too much, you will most likely get sick and throw up, and that's
Right.
not something that doesn't sound fun.
Doesn't sound like a
Um,
good time to you.
no, and like the effects just kind of weren't like I couldn't tell if I felt different or not. Like I couldn't tell if I was like, was it the coffee I had earlier? Or is it like am I working a little buzz on? Or it didn't really feel like it had any impact on my mood long term, on my ability to process things. So I was like, it's probably not like it's not worth microdosing to me.
Right. So are you doing microdosing most of the time, or are you doing like a full on dose when you're taking
Uh
these to review?
When I'm taking them to review, I'm doing a full on macro dose, but usually I try to microdose a little bit just to prepare myself so I'm not just kind of smacked in the face with the effects.
Right. Right.
But I've got like a B plus tincture that was also gifted to me, and
Hmm.
that I take like maybe a 1 milliliter or a half milliliter vial dropper and just put that in my coffee in the mornings, or put it in like it doesn't have a strong taste on its own, or you can kind of mix it into anything.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty important. A lot of people really can't stand the taste of mushrooms at all. I don't mind them
Oh
myself, but
God.
it sounds like you don't like them.
The taste is so like that's honestly that's the scariest part of it is the taste. Like, man, what is this gonna taste like? Because the
Right.
stronger it smells, the worse I know it's about to taste. And
Right.
what my husband and I found out last night was apparently if we I kind of like make them into like these little mushroom balls. So I grind up all the final product into just like I guess basically the mushroom equivalent of shake. And then I
Hmm.
take a little bit of water and kind of mash it together to where it's able to formulate this little ball.
Huh.
And it makes it to where it's easier to take instead of just slowly chewing through all those mushrooms. It's kind of just like
Right.
a single dose. And then I cover that in peanut butter. So kind of like how you feed your dog like a pill.
Right. Yeah, that's not a bad
And
idea.
it tastes like since a lot of the mushroom strains taste very nutty, it blocks it out completely. And crunchy peanut butter seems to be the best because it distracts you from the mushroom in there.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense too, because just peanut butter has the strong flavor itself. So it's going to
Yeah.
mask it a lot too, as well as
Mm.
pair nicely with it. But do
Yeah.
you get into any like culinary mushrooms at all? Are you
I
like
mean,
researching any of that kind of stuff too?
I also talk about functional mushrooms on the show. Yes, I've been recently doing a lot of work with lion's mane and trumella because I
Right.
had a company on the show called Real Mushrooms, which I believe is based out of Canada.
Okay.
Um, but their more wheelhouse is the functional mushrooms. I had them on the show to talk about how to integrate those in our pets' diets, like things like lion's mane, reishi, and chaga, with things like very low amounts of THC, which apparently is possible. I didn't know that.
Huh.
But yeah, it's just with it's harder to find people who are interested in finding about things that don't have trippy effects, even though I'm going to be talking about it all, of course.
Right.
Like with Trumella, it's got a moisturizing effect, which I definitely need here because compared to Arkansas, there's virtually no humidity, so my skin's very, very dry because I've always lived down south. I've been used to that humidity, and now I'm just like, I need some water.
Right.
But the Trumella really helps with moisturizing your skin, giving you kind of like the same way collagen works, it kind of giving you that youthful boost.
Right. So tremella is a type of mushroom. I've not heard of that one.
Yes. Yeah, I hadn't heard of
Interesting.
it either till they sent it to me, and I had to do a whole bunch of research. They tell me about it too, and it's really cool. They got that. They said that turkey tail. Apparently, there's been a lot of studies out on that on its ability to kind of combat cancer cells, and they've tested it in dogs so far.
Oh, really?
And I've linked that study on one of my latest episodes, the one with the integrative vet. So that would be the one to check out. I don't know all of
Right.
the studies off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
I just found out like a lot of different things, like the everyday mushrooms we get from the grocery store even have benefits for us.
Right. For sure. It's so interesting too, because I feel like mushrooms, whether you're talking about, psychedelic mushrooms or the functional mushrooms, like you mentioned, I feel are just as exciting and interesting as cannabis. And there's so much to learn about them and how they can benefit the world as well. So it's pretty interesting that you're getting into that and you're sort of marrying the cannabis and the fungi together on your show.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, do you have anything coming up on the horizon that you're particularly excited about?
Yes, I'm very excited for this. I'm planning on hosting a little live show here in Denver, Colorado on Halloween. It's going to be at their very first and only legally licensed cannabis consumption bar.
Oh,
So
really?
imagine just like a regular bar, but instead of having beer, vodka, whiskey, all that stuff, everything's infused, and they've got like a dab bar there for just different. It's like it's a consumption bar. It's not really a lounge feel. They don't like using that term because there's still a lot of like nuances to it, to where make sure nobody's getting in trouble. It's not like a free for all. You can't bring your own products into the bar. You got to buy everything there, consume it on site. But it's a very nice atmosphere that I'm hoping to have this little live show at. We're going to be trying to do a rolling competition, live tastings, because I'm coordinating getting a flower sponsor for that. And I'm going to try to do goodie bags as well.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You've never done anything like that before.
No, I have not. So I've been doing a lot of research, trying to talk to former guests that I've had on the show that do a lot of event planning themselves, kind of picking their brains. They've been helping me out. I've been making I just finished my sponsorship package, all those things, but I'm trying to get more officially grounded with the podcast now that I'm all moved in and settled down. I'm trying to get the LLC started up so I have like an official business and everything. And then from there, set up like a bank account for it. So that way it's, because I just feel some type of way about having these companies send money to my PayPal because I don't know. I want to have that all separated. So I want to make sure I'm established before I officially start promoting everything. Like, here are the vendor tables you can buy, yada, yada, yada. But, you got to wait till my bank account's ready. Like, let me just get all that set up first.
Right. Well, it sounds like you have lots of time to prepare for that anyway. So it's smart that you're waiting for Halloween because it gives you lots of time to do your research. And I'm sure putting on an event like this is going to be super fun and exciting. And you said at Colorado's first and only consumption space. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, there's other places here that have like a consumption lounge, but they're technically not doing it legally. This is the one that's by the book. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you're not going to have any problems with that, right? Well, that's super exciting. I'm really happy for you because I was on your show. I guess it was like a month ago, and I kind of discovered you then. I've just been seeing what you've been putting out on the socials and on your podcast, and you're just crushing it. And it's really cool to see fellow podcasters and people in the cannabis space doing interesting things. So I'm really glad that you took the time to come on my show today to talk about what you've been up to and the cool things you have coming up. And do you have any final words for the listeners of Bite Me today?
Well, just final words. I'd say go check out your episode, which was called Dudley Do Bite, just in case you want to get to know a little bit more about your creative process for the show. You can come check that out on Smoke to Smoke. Everybody just stay lifted and gifted and have a nice day.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ms. Cadabra. We will talk to you soon.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Miss Cadabra. I always love sitting down with fellow podcasters, especially in the cannabis space, who are working to change the conversation around the plant. And you can find the Smoke to Smoke podcast on all podcasting platforms, and I encourage you to check it out and show her some support. Of course, if you enjoyed this episode and you know somebody who might also enjoy it, please share, because sharing is caring, and word of mouth really does help make the show more discoverable to more people. I've linked to everything in the show notes, and you can find those over on bitemepodcast.com. The link should be in your podcast player. And of course, if there's anything, any feedback that you have that you'd like to share with me, anything at all, really, I love to hear from you. And you can always email me at stayhigh@bitemepodcast.com, or you can use the SpeakPipe podcast hotline and send me a voice message, which you'll also find on the homepage at bitemepodcast.com. So until next week, my friends, you know what to do. Stay high.
Are you tired of trying edibles that are inconsistent in strength and flavor? Attempting to figure out your tolerance? Do you want to take control of your edibles experience and find the optimum combination of factors that results in the best outcome? If so, this edibles journal is perfect for you. The Bite Me Edibles Journal provides a convenient and organized way for you to track and record your edibles experience, whether it's homemade edibles or store-bought. It includes 48 fillable pages. It's sized 8.5 by 11 for plenty of writing space, includes information on calculating the potency of homemade edibles, and it was created by an edibles expert. Whether you're a seasoned edibles enthusiast or just starting out on your cannabis journey, the Bite Me Edibles Journal is an essential tool for anyone interested in enjoying their edibles to the fullest. Take control of your high life with this convenient and helpful resource. Add it to your Amazon cart today. Tap the link in the show notes.